The sun on planet Relka burned red in the sky, and the ground below was cracked. Dry and dead, villagers stepped over bodies like trash, ignoring the ones too weak to beg, and among them, crawling in the dust, was Vilari the widow, her skin. Once bright like polished silver, now looked dull and gray. Her clothes hung loose on her bones, and her arms trembled as she reached for anything that looked like food. Her child, no older than 3 seasons, lay still on a cloth sack behind her, too tired to cry anymore. The other aliens passed by, pretending she didn't exist. One even kicked dirt at her, muttering, "Cursed widow." Another one said, "Let her starve, death follows her kind." Vilari had once been the wife of a respected warrior. Her mate died fighting in the last war, leaving her with nothing but a small daughter and a bad name. In Relkan culture, a widow without a clan was a ghost, unseen, unwanted, untouchable. Today, her legs had given up. She couldn't move anymore. She just lay there next to the garbage. Eunuch behind the supply post. Flies buzzed over a half-eaten ration bar someone had thrown away. She stared at it, her mouth dry like sand. That's when she heard boots. Not alien footsteps, but heavy, slow ones, human boots. A small convoy of Earth soldiers had arrived 2 days ago to deliver supplies to the Relkans. They were not allowed to interfere, just hand over goods and stay out of local matters. But one man didn't walk past. He stopped. His name was Ben Carter, a maintenance tech from Earth. Not even a soldier. His armor was dirty, his sleeves rolled up, and he carried boxes of protein packs and clean water tubes. He looked down at the broken figure in the dirt and paused. Something inside him twisted. She wasn't just starving. She was invisible, ignored by everyone around her. "Hey," Ben said softly, kneeling down beside her. Vilari flinched, her eyes widened. She hadn't heard a kind voice in seasons. Ben slowly placed a ration bar in front of her. She looked at it, then at him, suspicious. Was this a trick? Would he laugh like the others? He didn't. He just nodded and said, "It's yours." She reached with shaking hands, grabbed it, unwrapped it slowly, and took the smallest bite. Her eyes filled with tears, not because of the taste, but because someone had seen her. Ben's gaze moved to the small bundle behind her. "Is that your child?" he asked. Vilari nodded weakly, not trusting her voice. She hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Ben stood up, returned with a water tube, and placed it near the child's mouth. The little girl didn't move. "She's dehydrated," he murmured. His training told him to walk away, that this wasn't his problem. But his heart told him otherwise. He stayed for a few minutes, offering another food pack and half his own water tube. A Relkan elder passed by and growled, "Why waste supplies on that ghost human? She's nothing." Ben didn't respond, just kept his eyes on Vilari and the child. "No one is nothing," he muttered. That night, Vilari sat up against the garbage unit, holding her daughter close. They had eaten, they had drank, and someone had spoken to them with kindness. She watched the human walk back to his camp, wondering why he cared. The next morning, he came back, not with just food, but with a thin blanket and a small light toy from Earth that blinked when shaken. Vilari's daughter stirred, reached for it with tiny fingers, and made a sound something between a gasp and a laugh. Ben smiled. "There you go, kiddo." Vilari looked at him, her lips trembling. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was dry, unused. "Why help us?" Ben sat on the dirt beside her, not caring what the others thought. "Because I know what it's like to lose someone," he said. "And I know what it's like to need someone and have no one there." Tears ran down Vilari's cheeks, silent and slow. Her own people had called her cursed, a burden. But this stranger from another world, a human, saw her as a person. As the sun set behind the hills, casting red light across the dry plains, Vilari whispered to her child, "Maybe not all the stars are cold." Ben stood, giving one last look. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. Vilari watched him go, holding her daughter close, and for the first time in many seasons, she didn't feel like dirt. *, the second son of Relka. rose slow and red, casting long shadows across the dusty hills. Valari sat under the same broken shelter behind the garbage unit. Her child still curled up against her chest. But something was different today. Her eyes were open, watching the road, waiting. She wasn't waiting for food or mercy from her people. She had given up on them long ago. No, today she was waiting. For him, the human, and when she saw his boots appear over the hill, she held her breath. Her daughter stirred at her side, sensing the change in the air, sensing the soft hope creeping in through the cracks of their broken world. Ben Carter walked toward her, carrying a small pouch strapped across his chest and something bright in his hand. He smiled when he saw Valari awake and sitting up. "Morning," he said, crouching beside her again. "Thought I'd bring something better today." Valari said nothing, but her eyes were alert, curious. The wind blew softly across the cracked plains as Ben opened the pouch and took out a folded blanket. Clean and blue, he gently placed it around her shoulders. Then he turned to the little one. "And for the lady," he grinned, pulling out a strange object, a plastic cube with blinking lights and soft music inside. He shook it once, and the lights flashed in patterns, playing a gentle melody. Valari's daughter blinked at it. Unmoving, Ben shook it again, this time, placing it carefully within the child's reach. There was a long pause. Valari held her breath, then tiny fingers reached out and tapped the cube. The lights blinked again, the music played, and suddenly, from the child's lips came a soft giggle, short, unsure, but real. Valari covered her mouth with both hands. She hadn't heard her daughter laugh in moons. The sound was like water in the desert, like wind after stillness, like life. Ben's grin widened. "There she is." The child held the toy close and made a second sound of bubbling. Happy noise. Her eyes were wide with joy, as if something inside her had remembered how to feel. Valari wiped a tear from her cheek. You made her smile," she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. Ben didn't reply right away. He sat next to them and took a water pack from his belt, handing it to Valari. She opened it slowly, carefully tipping it to her daughter's lips first. "She hasn't smiled in so long," Valari said. I thought she had forgotten how. She just needed to feel safe again." Ben replied softly, "Even little ones can carry too much pain." Valari looked at him, really looked. His face was tired, his armor scratched, but his eyes were steady, warm. In a way her people's eyes had never been. She had grown up believing humans were cold, violent creatures, but this Ben wasn't like the stories. "You're kind," she said at last. "No human has ever helped me. No one should have to suffer like this," Ben answered. "Not you, not her." From the distance, two Relkan traders walked past, one of them noticing the scene and muttering under his breath, "Still wasting time on the cursed." Ben heard him, but didn't move. Valari flinched, her body tightening, prepared to be humiliated again. But Ben turned to her and said, "Let them talk." He reached into his pouch again and pulled out a protein bar, offering it to her daughter with a smile. "They don't matter." Valari looked at the food, then at Ben. "Why? Do you care what happens to us?" she asked. "I have nothing to give, nothing to offer. You're alive," Ben said simply. "That's enough reason." The wind howled for a moment, lifting dust into the air. Valari pulled the blanket closer around herself and her child. The soft blue cloth was warm against her skin, more comfort than she'd felt in years. Ben stood up and looked at the sun climbing higher. "I have to go help at the depot," he said. "But I'll come back later." Valari reached out, stopping him with a trembling hand on his arm. He looked down, surprised. "Thank you," she said. "For seeing us." Ben nodded, his voice quiet. "I'll bring something else next time, maybe some shoes for her." Valari watched him go, his figure disappearing behind a rise. Her child played with the blinking cube, making soft giggles again. And for the first time since her husband's death, Valari felt something stir inside her chest, something terrifying but beautiful. Hope. She looked at her daughter and whispered, Maybe not all kindness is dead." That evening, When the suns dipped low and the world turned golden, she sat outside her broken shelter, her eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting again, not for food, not for pity, but for the sound of human boots and the light of a soul who hadn't looked away. Ben Carter stood outside the supply depot, organizing boxes of dried meal packs under the blazing twin suns. He had just finished checking the list when a shadow fell over him. Looking up, he saw Commander Lorne, his superior, with a hard expression. On his face, "We need to talk, Carter," Lorne said, voice tight. Privately, Ben followed him behind the depot. Away from the others, his stomach tightened. He already knew this was about Villari. "I've received complaints," Lorne started, folding his arms. "From both the Relkan elders and our own officers." Ben stayed quiet, waiting. "They say you've been seen sharing rations with a local widow, one marked by her people as cursed." Lorne continued, "You're aware this violates our neutral observer policy, right?" "She was starving," Ben replied. "Her daughter too. Not your concern," Lorne snapped. "You're here to deliver supplies, not play hero." Ben clenched his jaw. "If it was a human child starving in the dirt, would you say the same thing?" Lorne's expression hardened. "You're close to crossing a line, Carter," he warned. "Any more charity, and you'll be pulled off this mission." Ben didn't answer. He turned and walked away, fists tight, heart burning. He didn't regret helping Villari, not for a second. Back in the village, Villari sat outside her shelter, wrapping the blanket tighter around her daughter as dust clouds danced across the hills. Her child clutched the blinking cube, still fascinated by its lights and music. For once, she looked more alive than before. But trouble was coming. A group of Relkan elders approached slowly, their robes dragging through the dust. Their leader, an elder named Kashu, pointed his staff at Villari. "You shame our kind by accepting help from the off-worlder," he hissed. "You bring his shadow upon us." Villari stood, still weak, but her spine straight. "He gave us food, water, warmth," she said, voice shaking but firm. "None of you did." Kashu's eyes blazed. "Because you are death-marked," he growled. "Your husband died, and your name died with him." Villari did not respond. She lowered her head, holding her child close. Kosh turned and walked away, muttering a curse. Ben arrived moments later, spotting the angry group as they left. Villari didn't look up. She sat on the ground again, quiet and small. "I saw them," Ben said, kneeling beside her. "What did they say?" "They said, 'Uncursed,'" Villari whispered, "that I'll bring ruin to anyone who helps me." Ben placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Do I look ruined to you?" he asked with a soft smile. Her lips twitched, almost smiling, almost breaking, but fear still clouded her face. "They will punish me if you keep coming," she said. "They might take her away from me." Ben looked at the child, now resting peacefully. Her skin was healing, her eyes brighter. He couldn't leave them here. Not like this. That night, Ben sneaked out of camp with a thermal tent hidden in a storage crate. He carried supplies, water, and a solar lantern. He found a small area outside the village, past the jagged rocks where the elders never went, and started clearing space in the dark. Villari and her daughter followed silently, her eyes full of worry, her hands holding tight to her little girl. Ben set up the small tent, laid out the blankets, and helped her inside. "You'll be safer here," he said. "It's far enough that they won't bother you." Villari looked at the clean space, the supplies, the light. It was more than she had seen in years. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, the same question burning in her voice. Ben looked at her, his expression serious now. "Because I've seen people abandoned before," he said, "and I swore I'd never be the kind of man who walks away again." Villari sat in silence, eyes glistening. Her child climbed into her lap, whispering something in their alien tongue, something soft, something that meant safe. The next day, Ben brought her a small earth purifier device, a solar-powered tool that could turn even dirty ground moisture into drinkable water. Villari stared at it in awe, carefully learning how to use it. He showed her how to set it up, adjust it, and keep it running. Soon, she wasn't just surviving, she was helping others. The whispers in the village grew louder. Some began calling her Ghost Mother, but others, mostly younger ones, started sneaking over to ask how the water device worked. Valari didn't turn them away, even though they had once mocked her. Ben noticed the change too. "They're watching you now," he said, not with hate but with respect. Valari shook her head. "They'll never truly accept me." "Maybe not," Ben said. "But they'll remember what you did." Valari turned to him. "And what will happen to you?" she asked. "Your commander, he warned you, didn't he?" Ben smiled, a tired smile full of resolve. "Let them send me home," he said. "I've already done what I came here to do." As the twin suns set again, painting the sky in golden fire, Valari watched her daughter sleep inside the glowing tent. She held the blinking cube close and whispered, "The human gave us back our future." And for the first time, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt alive. The air was too still that morning. Even the dust refused to move. Valari stood just outside her hidden tent, her daughter resting inside, and the horizon glowing a strange yellow. She had seen skies like that before, but only once, many seasons ago. A storm was coming, but this wasn't a normal storm. Not rain, not wind. Relkin storms were violent, deadly, and filled with acidic mist that burned skin and metal alike. They swept across the plains with fury, eating everything in their path. Valari's hands shook as she packed the few supplies they had. She didn't want to panic her child, but she could already feel the pressure building in the air, like a scream waiting to be unleashed. Back at the human outpost, Ben Carter checked the scanner. A red alert flashed across the screen. Storm Cell Zeta-4 moving fast. Expected impact in 3 hours. He cursed under his breath and grabbed his helmet. But his eyes weren't on the storm data. They were on the hills, toward the hidden tent he had set up for Valari and her daughter. He ran. Valari zipped the tent door shut and held her child close. Inside the thin shelter, the air grew warmer. The solar purifier was off now, the light dimming, and her daughter coughed in her sleep. Valari touched the side of the tent. Static buzzed through her fingers, a warning from the skies. Outside, the winds began to wail, loose stones flying through the air like knives. The sky turned orange, then blood red, and then the sound came, the awful rising roar of the acid storm. Valari curled around her child, pulling the thin blanket over them, hoping it would be enough. The tent shook violently, the poles groaning under the pressure. She whispered words of comfort into her daughter's ear, trying to stay calm, trying not to scream. Then, above the howl of the storm, came another sound. Boots. Ben stumbled over the rocks, helmet on, acid-resistant, armor hissing from every drop that hit him. He saw the tent ahead, flapping wildly in the wind. On the edge of collapse, without hesitation, he dropped to his knees and unzipped it, sliding inside just as one of the poles cracked. Valari gasped, eyes wide. "You came," she whispered, barely able to speak through the noise. Ben reached for the reinforced thermal shield in his pack, pulling it over them like a second tent, sealing the 4 of them, Valari, her child himself, and the thin hope they shared inside a soft glowing bubble. "I said I'd be back," he said, voice muffled through his mask. "And I never leave people behind." The storm slammed against the shield, but it held, a soft hum surrounded them, the barrier absorbing the acid wind and the heat. Inside, it was tight, hot, and cramped, but safe. Valari's daughter whimpered, eyes wide with fear. Ben pulled a small music cube from his belt and tapped it. A soft earth lullaby began to play. Valari held her daughter close, rocking slowly to the strange but gentle sound. "I thought you would leave," Valari said quietly. When the storm came, Ben shook his head. "Never," he said. "Not when someone needs me." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm tear at the world outside. Valari looked at Ben, this strange creature from another planet, who had no reason to help. No reward to gain, and yet risked his life. For her again and again. My husband, she said suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. He died protecting humans in the war. Ben turned toward her, surprised. They sent him to the front, she continued. Said it was an honor to serve beside Earth soldiers. Her eyes darkened. He saved many. But no one came for me when he died. Ben's throat tightened. I'm sorry, he said. He was a good man. Valari nodded slowly. Yes. And you remind me of him. Ben didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just sat beside her in the heat and the silence, as the storm screamed all around them, holding the line between survival and death. Hours passed when the storm finally died. The tent was nearly buried in dust and debris. Ben pushed open the flap, the shield folding back. Outside, the sky was blue again, but the land was scarred, trees stripped bare, rocks melted where the acid hit hardest. Valari stepped out slowly, holding her daughter close. Her skin had small burns where the heat had reached through the tent. Ben handed her a burn patch, carefully pressing it to her arm. She winced but didn't pull away. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Ben looked around at the destruction, then back at her. We'll rebuild this place better, he said. Stronger. Valari watched him as he began clearing the rubble from around the tent. Her daughter clung to her leg, still shaken, but alive, and for the first time, Valari realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back, not with weapons, not with anger, but why. Valari's arms burned. Even days after the storm had passed, the pain remained. The acid had kissed her skin through the cracks in the shield, leaving long, angry marks across her forearms and hands. She tried to hide them beneath the blanket, tried to pretend they didn't hurt. But her daughter noticed. Mama's arms are broken, the little one whispered in their alien tongue. Pressing her cheek against her mother's chest, Ben saw it too. He had returned each morning, helping clear the shelter, bringing more supplies, bringing laughter when the silence felt too heavy. But today, when he saw Valari's wounds again, he paused, his expression hardening. These need medical care, he said softly. Valari shook her head quickly, her body stiffening. No, she whispered. The alien clinic won't take me. They say I'm cursed. Then come with me. Ben said. To our med tent. Valari's breath caught in her throat. Your people. They won't allow me in. I'll handle it, Ben replied, his voice steady. You saved people during the raid. You warned us about the fires. They owe you. She didn't answer at first. The idea of walking into a human medical space filled her with fear. She had been rejected so many times. Spit on, ignored, pushed aside. Why would humans treat her differently? But the pain was growing worse, and her daughter had started crying in the night whenever Valari's skin cracked and bled. She had no medicine, no salves, only ash and cloth. So that evening, when the skies turned purple and soft winds returned, Ben returned to the shelter with his hands open, and Valari finally nodded. I'll come, she said, her voice almost too quiet to hear. Ben led her through the rocky trail, his body always positioned between her and the village roads, just in case anyone saw and tried to stop her. They reached the human camp just as the outer lights turned on. Casting golden rings across the ground, soldiers turned their heads as Valari walked in, wrapped in the same old blanket, holding her small daughter close. A few whispered, a few narrowed their eyes, but no one stepped forward to stop them. Ben pushed open the flap of the medical tent and called out, Doc got someone who needs a patch job. A short, older woman with graying hair and scanner goggles stepped out from behind a curtain. She raised an eyebrow when she saw Valari. She's not on our list, the doctor said, folding her arms. She's the reason we're still alive after the raid, Ben replied. Just take a look, that's all I'm asking. The doctor sighed, then motioned for Valari to sit. Fine, she muttered, but if command asks, I didn't see anything. Valari sat on the edge of the cot, her daughter curled against her. She trembled as she removed the blanket, revealing her scorched skin. The doctor's eyes widened slightly, then softened. "You waited this long with that?" she asked, reaching for a tube of synthetic skin salve. Valari nodded, silent. The doctor cleaned the wounds with gentle hands, then pressed the cool gel across each burn. It stung at first, but then relief. Valari gasped as the pain began to fade for the first time in days. Her daughter reached out and touched her arm, curious. "Better, Mama?" she whispered. Valari nodded, smiling weakly. "Better." Ben stood nearby, watching quietly. His heart ached seeing her like that, small, brave, still carrying the weight of every cruel word ever said to her. And yet, she never complained, never begged, never asked for more than the bare minimum. She was the strongest person he'd met. Since coming to Relka, the doctor handed Valari a small bag of medicine and bandages. "Apply twice a day, and no direct sun for a week," she said. "That arm will heal without scars if you're careful." Valari stared at the pouch in her hands like it was made of stars. "Thank you," she whispered, blinking away tears, as they walked out of the tent. Ben looked at her and asked, "How do you feel?" Valari paused, then said something strange, something soft. "I feel seen." Ben looked at her gently. "You should always have been seen." That night, back at the shelter, Valari set the pouch beside her bed. She touched her arms, now covered in clean bandages, and turned to her daughter. The child smiled at her, eyes wide and curious. "I think the human is part light," the child whispered sleepily. "He makes things better." Valari laughed softly, a real laugh, not one born from pain or fear, but from warmth. She reached up and touched her face, then looked at her reflection in the side of the water purifier, a blurry mirror made of steel. She didn't look like the cursed ghost anymore. She looked like someone healing. She turned to the sky, the stars twinkling above, and whispered, "You gave me back my name, human." Asterisk. The wind was quiet that day, too quiet. It carried a strange scent, burnt metal and fuel. Valari stood outside her shelter, watching the horizon with narrowed eyes. Her daughter clung to her side, whispering softly, "Something feels wrong." Ben had left early that morning to help unload a new supply shipment. He had promised to return before nightfall. Valari had grown used to his presence, the calm he brought with every footstep, but today her chest felt tight, heavy with something she couldn't explain. Then the sound came, a high-pitched screech, followed by the rumble of engines too fast, too low. Raiders. Valari had seen them before, long ago. Machines strapped to their backs, weapons grown from bone and tech. They didn't come to trade or talk, they came to take. Screams echoed through the Relkan village. Villagers ran in all directions. Leaders nowhere to be found. Elders hid in the temple. Guards dropped their weapons and fled. No one looked back, except Valari. She turned toward her daughter and said, "Stay inside the shelter. Do not open the flap for anyone but me or the human." The child nodded, fear in her wide eyes. Valari kissed her forehead and stepped outside, barefoot and unarmed. Her legs shook, but her heart burned with purpose. She ran toward the village. Smoke rose in columns as the raiders torched homes and stole supplies. Ben wasn't there yet, but his words echoed in her mind. "We fight for those who can't." She found a small group of frightened children hiding behind a broken wall, their parents gone, their faces covered in ash. She waved them over and guided them behind a larger building, whispering comfort, whispering hope. A raider spotted her. He raised his weapon, a long plasma blade shaped like a claw. But before he could strike, something unexpected happened. A blast shot from the hill, slamming into the raider's side, knocking him into the dirt. Ben had returned. He raced down the slope, blaster in hand, shouting, "Get the civilians out now." Valari didn't stop to think. She grabbed the closest child and ran, then another, guiding them toward the far side of the village where the humans had set up a temporary barrier. 2 human guards noticed her and opened the gate without question, letting the children through. Ben joined her moments later, his armor scorched but his eyes focused. "You okay?" he asked, out of breath. Valari nodded. More are hiding near the grain house, she said, pointing toward the smoke. Let's get them, he replied. Together, they moved through the village like shadows, pulling people from burning buildings. Covering their escape, dodging raider fire, Valari used the skills she had once buried deep inside her, the memory of her husband's lessons. How to move, how to protect, how to survive. She didn't feel like a cursed widow anymore. She felt like a mother, a fighter, a shield. When the last child was safe and the last raider chased off by the human defense drones, the village was quiet again. Destroyed, but quiet. The villagers stepped out slowly, confused, blinking in the smoke. They saw Valari dust-covered, bandaged, her body trembling from exhaustion, and they didn't call her cursed. They bowed their heads. One young Relkan boy walked up to her and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. Ben approached her later near the remains of the temple. He handed her a clean water pack and sat beside her on a broken wall. "You were amazing out there," he said. Valari looked at him, her voice soft. "I didn't know I could be." "You were more than brave," Ben said. "You saved lives, and not just your daughters." Valari looked down at her hands, still scarred, still shaking, but no longer hidden. "They looked at me differently today," she whispered. "Not like I was dirt. They saw the real you," Ben replied. "The one I saw from the beginning." Valari turned to him, her voice almost breaking. "Why did you see me when no one else did?" Ben was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because when I looked at you, I saw someone who hadn't given up, someone who still held on, even when she had nothing left." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I wanted to give up," she admitted, "so many times. But you didn't," Ben said, smiling gently. "That's what makes you powerful." From a distance, Valari's daughter ran toward them, her little arms full of flowers she had picked from the dust. "Mama, look," she said, placing them in Valari's lap. "The ground is growing again." Valari looked at the tiny blossoms, soft and green, blooming where there was once only ash and silence. "Yes," she whispered, pulling her daughter into her arms. "It is." And that night, as the stars returned to the sky and the smoke faded from the hills, Valari sat beneath the open heavens, holding her child close. The villagers no longer avoided her gaze. They offered nods, quiet words of thanks, even food. For the first time, she wasn't just tolerated, she was respected, and she owed it all to the human who chose to stay. The human camp was packing up. The mission on Relka was over. The supplies had been delivered, the defense systems installed. The raider attacks stopped. Soon the Earth convoy would leave the planet and return to orbit. Ben Carter stood near the Kalvevo edge of the landing platform, loading crates into the last shuttle. His face was calm, but his eyes kept drifting toward the hills, toward the small shelter where 2 lives had changed his own. Valari watched him from a distance, her daughter sitting on her lap beneath the new tarp Ben had helped build after the last storm. The village had changed. The people no longer spat when they saw her. They waved now. They offered food. Some even asked her to teach them how the human water purifier worked, but none of it mattered if he left. Her daughter looked up at her and whispered, "Is he going away, Mama?" Valari nodded slowly. "Yes, child, the humans have finished their work here." The little girl grew quiet. "Will he come back?" Valari didn't answer. Later that evening, Ben arrived one last time, this time in his full uniform. Armor cleaned, bag strapped tight. He looked tired, but when he saw them, he smiled like always. "I came to say goodbye," he said, kneeling beside them. "The shuttle leaves in an hour." Valari's throat tightened. Her hands trembled. "You are leaving?" she asked, though she already knew. Ben nodded. "Orders," he said simply. "They're moving us to another system. Some colony needs help with rebuilding." Valari looked away. "Of course," she whispered. "You're needed everywhere." Ben reached into his bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "I brought you something," he said, handing it to her daughter. Inside was a small necklace, a metal disc with a glowing blue light in the center. The Earth symbol engraved across the surface. The child gasped, her tiny fingers tracing the lines. "What is it?" "It's a beacon," Ben explained gently. "If you're ever in danger, or just need to send a message, press the center. And it'll send a signal." Valari blinked fast, her voice barely steady. "Why would you give us something like this?" Ben looked at her for a long time, then said, "Because I want you to be safe. Always. And because I hope this isn't the last time we meet." Silence fell between them. Valari stood slowly, holding her daughter's hand. "What if we wanted to come with you?" she asked, her voice so soft it was almost the wind. Ben's eyes widened slightly. "You'd leave Relka?" She nodded. "There's nothing left for us here except memories and burned stone, and you. You gave us something we never had, a future." Ben didn't answer right away. He looked at the child holding the necklace close to her chest, then at Valari, her scars healing, her strength shining like fire. His voice came out rough. "I can talk to my commander. There's a refugee program. It's not easy, but maybe." Valari stepped closer. "If there's a chance," she whispered, "even a small one, we will take it." At the landing platform, Ben approached the shuttle commander with Valari and her daughter beside him. The officers looked surprised, then confused. One of them said, "You want to register a Relkan civilian and her child as off-world companions?" Ben nodded. "She helped save the village during the last raid. She warned us, guided people to safety. She's earned her right to live." There was a pause, whispers among the officers, then a slow nod from the commander. "If she passes screening, she and the child can board." Valari covered her mouth in shock, her daughter holding tightly to her leg. We're really going?" she asked. Ben turned to her, smiling. "We are." Inside the shuttle, Valari looked out the small window as the engines hummed to life. The ground below was fading, her old life, the pain, the silence, all drifting away with the dust. She looked at Ben beside her, his eyes closed, resting finally. She looked at her daughter, fast asleep with the necklace clutched tight in her hands. And she looked at herself reflected in the glass, not a widow anymore, not a ghost, not cursed, just a mother, a survivor, and now a traveler between stars. When the shuttle broke through the sky, entering orbit, Valari whispered softly, "He gave us a name again," and far above Relka, beyond the clouds, the stars welcomed her like an old friend.